Hello, and welcome to Day by Day True Crime Stories, the podcast where we explore a different crime or justice milestone from this day in history. I'm your host, Kona Gallagher, and today is August 3rd. On the night of August 2nd, 2006, Robert Eric Wone, a respected attorney, stayed overnight at a friend's house in DuPont Circle in Washington, D.C. By the next day, he was dead. The home showed signs of careful staging. The people inside claimed that an intruder did it. But something about the scene has never set right. Today, we're discussing one of the most unsettling unsolved murders in modern DC history. It's a story of trust, secrecy, and suspicion. A man killed in a house full of friends with no clear answers, even decades later. Today, we're talking about the murder of Robert Wone. Let's get started. It was a humid summer night in Washington, D.C. when 32-year-old Robert Wone called his wife, Catherine, shortly after 9:30 p.m. He told her he'd be staying at his friend Joe Price's house for the night after a work event. Robert told her he loved her, and the two hang up. Kathleen didn't think twice about this. It was a favor. It was just a simple overnight stay that made sense. He had been out late at this event. His friends lived in the city, and they lived back in the suburbs of Virginia. Robert arrived at the house at around 10:30 p.m. Robert arrived at the house located at 1509 Swan Street Northwest. It was a 3-story row house in a quiet, upscale neighborhood. Inside lived Joseph Price, Robert's college friend, and Price's 2 housemates and partners, his boyfriend Victor Zaborski and Dylan Ward. According to these 3 men, the evening was uneventful. They chatted, had a glass of water, and Robert went to bed in the guest room. But then shortly before midnight, a 911 call came in. Price's voice on the line was panicked. He claimed that an intruder had broken in and stabbed their guest. When paramedics arrived shortly before midnight, they found Robert lying on the neatly made pull-out bed in the guest room. He had 3 clean, precise stab wounds to his chest. He was still in his gym shorts and t-shirt. And oddly, there was almost no blood. The 3 residents, all dressed in white bathrobes, stood by, calm and oddly disengaged. EMTs would later say that it felt less like a crime scene and more like something that was staged. One responder said it looked like Wone had been showered, redressed, and placed in bed. Paramedics took Wone to George Washington University Hospital, where he was pronounced dead at 12:24 a.m. on August 3rd. The scene at Swan Street raised immediate red flags. There were no signs of forced entry. The back gate was easily accessible, but there was no damage, no muddy footprints, and the alarm hadn't gone off. Nothing had been stolen. Plus, the guest room where Robert was staying was clean. Maybe too clean. Investigators noticed inconsistencies almost immediately. At first, Price said that he found Wone in the kitchen. Then it was the guest room. His story changed within hours. And Robert's wounds were almost surgical in nature. And forensic teams also noted that there were no defensive wounds, which suggested to them that Robert had either been immobilized or unconscious during the attack. Needle marks were discovered on his feet, neck, and chest. But oddly, no sedatives or toxins showed up on the toxicology report. Prosecutors would later theorize that a fast-acting paralytic like succinylcholine may have been used and metabolized prior to being detected. But blood samples weren't preserved for retesting. Later, cadaver dogs would hit on the home's dryer lint trap and the outdoor patio drain. Investigators believed that someone had cleaned up evidence, perhaps showered or laundered clothes, before police arrived. The clean sheets, the lack of blood, and the missing time between the alleged attack and the 911 call only deepened their suspicions. Even more suspicious, in the bedroom, a knife smeared with blood was found on the nightstand. But tests showed that the knife didn't match the wounds. The blade was the wrong length. However, a knife from Dylan Ward's cutlery set, which did match the wounds, was missing. In the basement, police discovered a stash of BDSM gear, restraints, clamps, and equipment that one officer described as medieval. Price, Zaborski, and Ward insisted that that had nothing to do with Robert and that no sexual activity had occurred that night. From the start, police believed that the residents of 1509 Swan Street were hiding something. Their statements were vague and they often contradicted each other. Detectives noted their calm demeanor, their lack of urgency, and how none of them seemingly performed CPR or even called for help immediately. As police worked the case, they filed an affidavit stating Robert Wone was restrained, incapacitated, sexually assaulted, and murdered inside 1509 Swan Street, end quote. Yet, there wasn't enough physical evidence to charge anyone with murder. Instead, in 2008, 2 years after the killing, Price, Zaborski, and Ward were all charged with conspiracy, obstruction of justice, and tampering with evidence. Prosecutors argued that while they may not have been able to prove who stabbed Wone, the trio clearly collaborated to cover it up. The trial began in 2010 and was presided over by Judge Lynn Leibovitz. The prosecution presented over 30 witnesses and reams of forensic evidence, painting a picture of a staged scene and a coordinated deception. The defense countered that the prosecution had no direct evidence tying any of them to Wone's death. They argued that the trio was traumatized, not deceptive, and that the inconsistencies were the result of panic, not guilt. In June 2010, Judge Leibovitz acquitted all 3 men. She said that the government's theory was plausible, but wasn't proven beyond a reasonable doubt. In her decision, she wrote, quote, "I believe the defendants know more than they have said, but I am constrained by the evidence," end quote. Following the criminal trial, Robert's widow, Catherine Wone, filed a $20 million wrongful death suit against Price, Zaborski, and Ward. In 2011, the case was settled out of court for an undisclosed sum. Robert Wone was a deeply respected attorney. He graduated from the College of William and Mary and the University of Pennsylvania Law School. He had just started a new role as general counsel at Radio Free Asia and was known for his work ethic, humility, and his devotion to public service. His friends and colleagues described him as selfless. He was a man who always helped others and never sought the spotlight. And that made the circumstances of his death all the more haunting. Why would someone target him? Was he the victim of a sadistic act? Was it a drug-fueled experiment? Or was there an actual unknown intruder? Even now, Robert's case remains officially unsolved. The FBI and the DC police have both stated the homicide investigation is still open. His widow, Catherine, has largely stayed out of the spotlight in recent years, but the trust she helped build continues its legacy of legal aid and advocacy. Each year, the Robert Wone Fellowship at William and Mary helps students pursue public interest law. Scholarships, clerkship programs, and community fellowships now bear his name. Robert Wone was a man of principle and promise. He was someone whose life embodied public service. And he was also a man who was murdered in a home full of people, and no one has ever been truly held accountable. His death reminds us that justice isn't always clear-cut. Thank you for joining me on today's episode of Day by Day True Crime Stories. If you found Robert's story compelling, please subscribe, rate, and review the podcast. It'll help us grow. And be sure to join me again tomorrow as we explore another significant event in true crime history. Until then, stay safe and remember that behind every headline is a life worth remembering. Day by Day True Crime Stories is a Little Monster production.
Hey, you can do it!